An elite alien warrior faces impossible odds when her legendary weapon breaks at the worst moment, only to discover that humans fight differently than any species in the galaxy. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, there are legends whispered in 1,000 different tongues about warriors whose names echo through the stars. Among the Kalari, no name carried more weight than Zarth the Unbroken. Her crystalline spear had never failed her in 300 battles across 40 star systems. But today, surrounded by enemies on the desolate moon of Zirion 7, she would learn that even legends can shatter. What she didn't know was that somewhere above, a species the galaxy had dismissed as primitive was about to change everything she understood about warfare, honor, and what it truly means to fight alongside someone willing to die for a stranger. The crimson sand of Zirion 7 clung to everything like dried blood, and today it might as well have been. Zarth crouched behind a broken piece of ancient machinery, her 4 arms aching from the weight of her ceremonial spear. The weapon hummed with contained energy, its crystalline shaft glowing pale blue in the dying light of the system's twin suns. 50 meters in every direction, the Vorthak Raiders had formed their killing circle. Their black carapaces gleamed like oil, and their mandibles clicked in anticipation. She had counted at least 30 of them, maybe more hidden in the ruins of the old mining facility. Each one stood nearly 3 meters tall and carried enough firepower to level a small building. Zarth flexed her secondary arms, feeling the familiar weight of her plasma daggers. The Kalari were known throughout the galaxy for their grace in battle, their ability to dance between enemy attacks while striking with lethal precision. Her people had mastered the art of single combat over millennia, turning warfare into something approaching poetry. But poetry didn't mean much when you were outnumbered 15-1. Kalari warrior, the largest Vorthak, called out, its voice a harsh rasp that sounded like grinding metal. "You have fought well, but this ends now. Surrender your weapon, and we will grant you a quick death." Zarth allowed herself a bitter laugh. Her people had a saying, better to die with honor than live with shame. The Kalari had never surrendered, not once in their recorded history. She wouldn't be the first. "I am Zarth of the Crimson Blade clan," she called back, rising to her full height. At 2.5 meters tall, she was imposing by most species standards, though still dwarfed by the Vorthak. "I carry the spear of my ancestors, forged in the heart of a dying star. Come and take it if you can." The Vorthak leader made a sound that might have been laughter. "As you wish, little bird." Warriors of the Hive, advance. They came at her from all sides, a coordinated assault that spoke to their military training. The Vorthak had conquered 17 star systems through sheer brutal efficiency. They didn't fight with honor or grace. They simply overwhelmed their enemies through superior numbers and firepower. Zarth activated her spear's energy field and spun into motion. The weapon became a blur of deadly light as she deflected plasma bolts and struck out at the nearest raiders. Her first thrust punched through a Vorthak shoulder armor, sending purple ichor spraying across the sand. Her second attack severed another's primary weapon arm at the joint. But for every enemy she wounded, 2 more pressed closer. Plasma bolts seared the air around her, and she had to constantly move to avoid being overwhelmed. Her secondary arms worked independently, the plasma daggers carving deadly arcs through the air as she fought to keep the circle from closing. The dance of combat had always been second nature to her. Every Kalari child learned the traditional forms before they could properly walk. The spear was an extension of her will, responding to her thoughts as much as her movements. She flowed between attacks like water, striking where her enemies were weakest and fading away before they could respond. For a moment, it almost seemed like she might survive. 3 Vorthak lay dead or dying in the sand, and the others had grown more cautious. But then, her spear's energy cell began to flicker, the steady hum changing to an irregular pulse. Zarth's heart sank. The weapon was ancient, passed down through 20 generations of her clan. Its power source had seemed limitless, but nothing lasted forever. She had pushed it too hard in too many battles, and now it was finally failing her when she needed it most. A Vorthack plasma bolt struck the spear's shaft directly, and the weapon's energy field collapsed entirely. Without the protective barrier, the next shot would kill her instantly. "The mighty Kalari's toy is broken," the leader taunted. "Perhaps now you'll reconsider our generous offer." Zara Th raised the spear anyway, even though it was now little more than an ornate metal rod. "I would rather die fighting than live as your prisoner." "Then, you shall have your wish." The Vorthack raised their weapons in unison, 30 plasma rifles trained on her position. Zara Th closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to her ancestors, preparing for the end. The weapons discharged simultaneously, filling the air with deadly energy. But instead of burning through her armor, the plasma bolt struck something else entirely. A massive explosion rocked the ruins, sending debris flying in all directions. When the dust cleared, Zara Th saw something that made her question her sanity. A figure stood between her and the Vorthack raiders, seemingly untouched by the devastating barrage. But this wasn't another Kalari or even one of the other warrior species she knew. This being was shorter than her, probably only about 1.8 meters tall, and its form was completely enclosed in some kind of advanced armor. The armor itself was like nothing she had ever seen. It wasn't the ceremonial plate worn by Kalari warriors or the chitinous natural armor of species like the Vorthack. This was clearly technological, but it moved like a second skin. The surface was a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange markings glowed faintly along its edges. "What are you?" the Vorthack leader demanded, its voice betraying the first hint of uncertainty. The figure turned slightly, and Zara Th caught a glimpse of its helmet. The faceplate was completely opaque, offering no hint of what lay beneath. When it spoke, its voice was filtered through some kind of modulator that made it sound strangely distorted. "Human," it said simply, as if that explained everything. Zara Th had heard of humans, of course. Every spacefaring species had. They were newcomers to the galactic stage, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Most considered them primitives, barely worthy of notice. Their technology was crude by galactic standards, and they had no great military victories to their name. But this human had just survived a coordinated plasma barrage that would have vaporized most beings instantly. "Impossible," the Vorthack leader hissed. "Humans are weak. Your species has no warriors worth mentioning." The human's helmet tilted slightly, and Zara Th could have sworn she heard amusement in its filtered voice. "That's what everyone thinks. Makes this part easier." What happened next defied everything Zara Th thought she knew about combat. The human didn't charge forward in a glorious assault like a Kalari warrior would. It didn't try to intimidate its enemies through shows of strength like the Thorian berserkers. Instead, it simply vanished. Not literally, Zara Th realized after a moment of confusion. The human's armor had somehow bent light around itself, creating perfect optical camouflage. She could still track its movement by watching the sand where its feet disturbed the ground. But the Vorthack seemed completely lost. The first raider died without ever seeing its killer. One moment it was scanning the ruins for targets. The next a blade had appeared from nowhere and severed its head cleanly from its shoulders. The weapon looked like some kind of vibrating metal, impossibly sharp and completely silent. Panic spread through the Vorthack ranks as they fired wildly at empty air. Their plasma bolts struck nothing but sand and stone, while one by one their comrades fell to an enemy they couldn't see or touch. Zara Th watched in fascination as the human demonstrated a completely different approach to warfare. Where Kalari combat was about honor and skill, about proving one's worth through single combat, this was something else entirely. The human fought like a predator, striking from shadows and disappearing before its enemies could respond. But it wasn't without its own strange code of honor. When two Vorthack tried to retreat, the human let them go. When one of the raiders fell wounded but still breathing, the human moved past without delivering a killing blow. This wasn't mindless slaughter. It was precise, calculated, and somehow more terrifying than any berserker rage. Within minutes, 20 Vorthak lay dead in the sand. The remaining 10 had formed a defensive circle, back to back, plasma rifles trained outward at every shadow. "Show yourself, coward," the leader roared. "Face us with honor." The human's laughter echoed from speakers hidden in its armor. "Honor? You just try to execute a single warrior who is already defeated. Where was your honor then?" Suddenly, the optical camouflage disengaged, and the human stood directly behind the Vorthak leader. Before any of them could react, it had grabbed the creature's head in both hands. "Here's the thing about humans," it said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather instead of standing in the middle of a battlefield. "We don't fight fair. We fight to win." The leader's head snapped to one side with a wet crack, and its massive body toppled to the sand. The remaining Vorthak broke and ran, their military discipline completely shattered by the death of their commander. The human made no move to pursue them, instead standing quietly among the carnage as if nothing had happened. Zarath stared at the figure, trying to process what she had just witnessed. In her 300 years of life, she had seen many different fighting styles. She had studied the blade dancing of the ethereal courts, the psychic warfare of the mind-touched, even the reality-warping abilities of the old ones. But this was something entirely new. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why did you help me?" The human turned toward her, and she could see her own reflection in its featureless faceplate. "You were willing to die fighting. That's worth something. But we've never met. I'm not even human. You owe me nothing." The figure was quiet for a moment, and Zarath wondered if it was considering how to answer. When it finally spoke, its words carried a weight that surprised her. Sometimes that's exactly when it matters most. The human began moving among the fallen Vorthak, checking each body with professional efficiency. Not looting, Zarath realized, but making sure they were actually dead. It was the behavior of someone who had learned hard lessons about wounded enemies. "What's your name?" she called out. Marcus Chun, Terran Special Forces, came to reply. "And you're Zarath of the Crimson Blade clan. I heard your challenge. You know Kalari customs?" Marcus paused in his examination of a fallen raider. "I make it my business to know. Cultural understanding can mean the difference between an ally and an enemy." Zarath looked down at her broken spear, its crystalline shaft now dark and lifeless. 300 battles, and it had finally failed her. According to Kalari tradition, a warrior whose weapon broke in combat was considered cursed, unfit to carry arms until they could forge a new one. The process could take years, and she wasn't even sure she remembered all the proper rituals. "Your weapon," Marcus said, approaching her carefully. "It's important to you." "It's everything," she admitted. "Without it, I'm no longer a warrior. I'm just nothing." "I don't think that's true. You don't understand. Among my people, the weapon chooses the warrior. This spear has been in my family for 20 generations. Its breaking means I've lost the ancestors' favor." Marcus tilted his helmeted head, considering her words. "Maybe it just means you need a different kind of weapon." Before Zarath could ask what he meant, her communicator crackled to life. The voice that emerged was harsh and mechanical, speaking in the clicking language of the Hive Collective. "Kalari warrior, this is Hive Commander Zethkar. You have killed our advanced scouts, but our main force is already en route to your position. Surrender now, and we will grant you the honor of dying in the fighting pits. Resist further, and we will hunt down every member of your clan and feed them to our young." Zarath closed her eyes, feeling the weight of despair settle on her shoulders. The Vorthak had found her because she had been escorting a refugee ship full of Kalari civilians to safety. If she didn't stop them here, thousands of innocent lives would be lost. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, apparently understanding the threat, even though he shouldn't have been able to translate the alien language. "Maybe an hour before their main force arrives," Zarath replied. "Why do you ask?" "Because," Marcus said, reaching into a compartment on his armor and pulling out a device she didn't recognize. An hour is plenty of time to even the odds. He activated the device, and Zarth heard a low hum building in intensity. "What is that?" "Emergency beacon," Marcus explained. "My ship's in orbit, but it's not the only human vessel in this system. The UN Prometheus is conducting exercises about 3 light minutes away. One ship against an entire hive fleet." Marcus's filtered laughter was surprisingly warm. "Like I said, we don't fight fair. The Prometheus is a heavy cruiser, but that's not why the hive should be worried." He paused, and she could almost hear him grinning behind the helmet. "They should be worried because humans have something no other species in the galaxy seems to understand." "What's that?" "We don't abandon our people. Ever." As if summoned by his words, the sky above them began to shimmer with the telltale distortion of ships dropping out of hyperspace. But these weren't Vorthack vessels. Zarth's enhanced vision picked out the angular profiles of human warships, their hulls scarred with battle damage and bristling with weapons she didn't recognize. "How many ships?" she asked, awed despite herself. "Depends on how many were in range when the beacon went active," Marcus replied casually. "Could be just the Prometheus. Could be half the Third Fleet. Humans tend to come running when someone calls for help." The lead ship, massive and predatory-looking, was already powering up its weapon systems. Zarth could see energy building along arrays of cannon that looked like they could crack a planet. "This is Admiral Rodriguez aboard UN Prometheus." A new voice crackled through Marcus's comm system. "Marine, what's your situation?" "One friendly down, sir," Marcus replied. "Heavy enemy contact inbound. Estimate battalion strength Vorthack force with air support." "Understood. Launching strike fighters now. All ships, weapons free. Let's show these bugs what happens when they threaten our people." Zarth stared at the human standing beside her, trying to understand what she was witnessing. She had helped him? No, that wasn't right. He had helped her, a complete stranger from an alien species, and now his entire fleet was preparing to go to war to protect her. "I still don't understand," she said quietly. "Why would you do this? Why would your people risk their ships for someone they've never met?" Marcus looked up at the sky, where the first human fighters were already screaming through the atmosphere toward the incoming hive ships. "Because that's what humans do. We're pack hunters, tribal creatures. When one of the tribe is threatened, we all respond. But I'm not human. I'm not part of your tribe. You are now," Marcus said simply. "You stood and fought when you could have run. You were willing to die for your people. That makes you tribe, whether you're human or not." Above them, the first explosions lit up the sky as human and Vorthack forces clashed in orbit. But down on the surface, Zarth felt something she hadn't experienced since her spear had broken. She felt like a warrior again. "What do we do now?" she asked. Marcus checked his weapons and scanned the horizon where dust clouds marked the approach of the hive ground forces. "Now we do what humans do best. We fight dirty, we fight together, and we don't stop until the enemy remembers why they should have left us alone." He handed her a weapon she didn't recognize, something that hummed with contained energy and felt perfectly balanced in her hands. "Consider this alone until we can get your spear fixed. You think it could be repaired?" "Human engineers are pretty good with impossible problems," Marcus said. "But first, we need to survive the next few hours." As if on cue, the ground began to tremble with the approach of heavy vehicles. The Vorthack had arrived, and they had brought everything they had. But for the first time since her spear had failed, Zarth found herself smiling. She wasn't alone anymore. The weapon Marcus had given her was unlike anything Zarth had ever held. Where her ancestral spear had been a work of art, crafted with ceremony and blessed by priests, this human device was purely functional. No decorative engravings, no crystalline beauty, just black metal and contained violence. "Plasma rifle, Mark 7, Marcus explained as he showed her the controls. 300 shots per power cell, variable yield from stun to remove the problem. Point and click interface. Zarth hefted the weapon, surprised by how natural it felt in her hands despite its alien design. Your people make war machines instead of warrior tools. Different philosophies, Marcus agreed, checking his own arsenal. She counted at least 4 different weapons attached to his armor, plus equipment she couldn't identify. Kalari fight to prove honor. Humans fight to go home alive. The trembling in the ground grew stronger, accompanied by the distinctive whine of anti-gravity engines. Through the dust clouds on the horizon, she could make out the approaching Vorthak force. Dozens of heavy assault vehicles, their black hulls bristling with weapons. Above them, atmospheric fighters screamed through the sky, engaged in deadly aerial ballet with human interceptors. 60 ground vehicles, maybe more, Zaratiech observed, her enhanced vision picking out details through the dust. Each one carries a full squad of warriors. We're looking at 800 enemy combatants, minimum. Plus their air support, Marcus added cheerfully. Don't forget the flying ones. Zaratiech stared at him. Any sane warrior would be calculating retreat routes or preparing for a glorious last stand. Marcus sounded like he was discussing dinner plans. You realize we're about to be overwhelmed by impossible odds. Story of my life, Marcus replied, activating something on his armor that made it shimmer slightly. But here's the thing about humans, Zaratiech. We specialize in impossible. Before she could ask what he meant, the ground exploded around them. Not from enemy fire, but from human orbital strikes. Pillars of superheated plasma lanced down from space, carving precise holes in the Vorthak formation. Vehicles simply vanished in flashes of white-hot energy, leaving nothing but glass craters in the sand. That's our cue, Marcus said, grabbing her arm. Time to move. They sprinted through the ruins as the bombardment continued. But Zaratiech noticed something strange about the humans' targeting. The strikes weren't trying to destroy the entire enemy force. Instead, they were creating gaps, forcing the Vorthak to spread out and lose formation cohesion. Why aren't your ships destroying them all? She asked as they took cover behind a fallen wall. Because that would be wasteful, Marcus replied, setting up what looked like a portable sensor array. The Vorthak are excellent fighters when they can use combined tactics. Take away their coordination, force them to fight as individuals, and they're just big bugs with attitude problems. The wisdom of his strategy became apparent as the surviving Vorthak vehicles tried to regroup. Without their tight formations, they were vulnerable to the human fighters diving down from above. Missiles and energy weapons carved through their ranks, turning their organized advance into a chaotic scramble for cover. But even reduced numbers meant they were still facing hundreds of enemies. Zaratiech watched squads of Vorthak warriors dismounting from their damaged transports, forming into smaller hunting packs. These weren't the same raiders from before. These were elite soldiers, their armor heavier and their weapons more sophisticated. Contact, 2 o'clock. Marcus reported into his comm system. Squad-sized element, moving to flank. Copy that, Ghost 7, came the reply from Admiral Rodriguez. Prometheus is tracking multiple hostiles converging on your position. We're cycling orbital support, but you'll need to keep mobile. Marcus turned to Zaratiech, his helmet tilting thoughtfully. Quick question. How do you feel about asymmetric warfare? I don't know what that means. It means fighting smart instead of fighting fair. He handed her several small devices that looked like metal spheres. Proximity mines. Arm them with this switch. Throw them where you want the enemy not to step. They'll do the rest. Zaratiech examined the devices dubiously. Where I come from, warriors face their enemies in open combat. Using hidden weapons is considered dishonorable. Where I come from, honor doesn't stop bullets, Marcus replied bluntly. But I understand the concern. Think of it this way. You're not hiding from individual combat. You're creating opportunities for it. Before she could ask what he meant, the first Vorthak squad rounded a corner of ruined machinery. 6 warriors in full battle armor, their plasma rifles already charged and ready. They spotted the human and Kalari immediately and opened fire. Marcus didn't try to dodge or deflect the incoming shots like a traditional warrior would. Instead, he activated his optical camouflage and simply vanished from sight. The Vorthack plasma bolts struck empty air where he had been standing. But instead of disappearing himself, he had somehow used his cloaking technology to create a distraction. While the enemies were confused by his vanishing act, Zarth found herself in perfect position for a traditional Kalari assault. She moved like liquid death, the human weapon adapting to her natural fighting style. Where her ancestral spear had required careful management of energy reserves, this plasma rifle simply fired when she pulled the trigger. No ceremony, no ritual preparación. Just immediate, devastating results. Her first shot punched through a Vorthack's chest armor like it was paper. The second took another's head clean off. By the time the survivors realized they were being flanked, Marcus had reappeared behind them. What followed was unlike any combat Zarth had ever experienced. It wasn't the formal dance of Kalari warfare, with its prescribed moves and countermoves. It wasn't the brutal, slugging match favored by species like the Thorians. This was something entirely new, coordinated chaos. Marcus fought like a ghost, appearing just long enough to eliminate a target before vanishing again. But his movements weren't random. Each attack was perfectly timed to give Zarth an opening for her own strikes. When she moved forward, he provided covering fire. When she needed to reposition, he created distractions. It was as if they had trained together for years instead of meeting minutes ago. The six-warrior squad was eliminated in less than 30 seconds, but their deaths had given away the defender's position. Zarth could hear more enemies approaching from multiple directions, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. This is just the beginning, Marcus warned, reloading his weapons with practiced efficiency. The Vorthack fight in waves, each one bigger and better equipped than the last. How do you know so much about their tactics? Zarth asked, setting up 2 of the proximity mines at likely approach routes. Because humans study our enemies, Marcus replied. We don't just learn how to fight. We learn how they think, how they organize, what they consider important. Information is the best weapon. As if to prove his point, his armor's display showed a detailed tactical map of the surrounding area. Red dots marked confirmed enemy positions, while blue indicators tracked friendly forces. Zarth was amazed to see human troops scattered throughout the ruins, small teams that were systematically disrupting Vorthack formations. How many of your people are down here? She asked. Currently? 16 Marines, plus you and me, Marcus said casually. Give or take whoever else might have dropped in during the last few minutes. 18 people against several hundred enemies? Standard Tuesday for the Corps, Marcus replied. Though I admit, having orbital support makes things easier. The conversation was interrupted by the whine of incoming artillery. Vorthack heavy weapons teams had set up in the distance and were preparing to level the entire area. Zarth could see the muzzle flashes of their plasma cannons charging for a barrage that would reduce the ruins to molten glass. Moo! Marcus shouted, grabbing her arm again. They sprinted through the maze of broken machinery as the bombardment began. Superheated plasma struck the positions they had just abandoned, turning metal and stone to vapor. The Vorthack weren't taking any chances this time. They were going to obliterate everything in the area and sort out the bodies later. But Marcus led them through a route that seemed to anticipate each strike before it landed. His armor sensors were apparently sophisticated enough to track the incoming fire and calculate safe paths through the destruction. How is this possible? Zarth gasped as they dove behind a fallen support beam just before another plasma barrage struck. Predictive algorithms, Marcus explained, not even breathing hard despite their desperate sprint. The armor's AI can analyze enemy firing patterns and project optimal evasion routes. It's not perfect, but it beats guessing. They reached a position where several other human Marines had gathered. Zarth counted 5 soldiers in similar armor to Marcus, each one bristling with equipment she couldn't identify. They moved with the same fluid efficiency, and she realized this wasn't just advanced technology. These humans had trained until their teamwork became instinctive. Sergeant Shun, One of them said, approaching Marcus. Lieutenant Morrison's compliments, sir. The LZ is secured and ready for heavy equipment drop. Outstanding, Corporal Williams, Marcus replied. What's our supply situation? Full resupply incoming, sir. Including some toys the tech boys wanted field tested. ZRTH watched the exchange with growing confusion. The humans were talking about their situation like it was a routine training exercise. Meanwhile, explosions continued to rock the area as Vorthack forces closed in from all sides. I don't understand, she said finally. You're surrounded, outnumbered, and under heavy fire. Why do you all seem so calm? Marcus and the other Marines exchanged glances. Because we've done this before, he explained. Different planet, different enemy, same basic problem. Hostile force needs removing, civilians need protecting, and with the people who handle that kind of work. But surely you must feel fear? Concern for your survival? Of course we do, Marcus said. Fear keeps you alive, but panic gets you killed. So we train until the fear becomes useful instead of paralyzing. Before ZRTH could respond, something massive rumbled overhead. She looked up to see a human transport ship dropping through the atmosphere, its hull scarred with atmospheric entry burns. The vessel was enormous, easily the size of a Kalari heavy cruiser, but it moved with surprising agility. That's our ride, Corporal Williams announced with obvious satisfaction. The bus is here, people. The transport ship hovered over a cleared area about 200 meters away and began deploying its cargo. ZRTH watched in amazement as vehicle after vehicle dropped from its bay, each one cushioned by anti-gravity fields and deploying the moment it touched ground. But these weren't ordinary military vehicles. She saw tanks whose armor seemed to ripple and shift like liquid metal. Artillery pieces that assembled themselves from component parts. Infantry fighting vehicles that sprouted sensor arrays and defensive systems the moment they landed. Adaptive military hardware, Marcus explained, seeing her expression. Human engineering philosophy. Build it tough, build it smart, and build it to handle anything. The Vorthack artillery bombardment suddenly shifted, targeting the new arrivals. But the human vehicles responded instantly. Point defense systems activated, shooting down incoming plasma shells with streams of hypervelocity projectiles. Smoke generators deployed, creating concealment clouds. The tanks began returning fire with weapons that made the Vorthack cannons look primitive. Within minutes, the entire tactical situation had changed. Where before it had been a handful of Marines holding off a superior force through cunning and mobility, now it was becoming a proper battle. And the humans ZRTH realized had been planning this from the moment Marcus first activated his beacon. You knew this would happen, she said, understanding dawning. You planned all of this. Not planned exactly, Marcus corrected, but prepared for. Humans don't like to be surprised, so we try to think through every possible scenario ahead of time. What you're seeing is standard operating procedure for a hostile encounter in unknown territory. Your people are remarkably paranoid. Our people have survived some very unpleasant wars, Marcus replied grimly. Paranoia is a survival trait. A new voice crackled through the Marine communication system. All ground units, this is Prometheus Actual. We're tracking multiple Vorthack reinforcement fleets entering the system. Estimate 6 heavy cruisers plus escorts, ETA 40 minutes. Recommend you finish your business and prepare for extraction. Copy, Prometheus, Marcus replied. Request permission to demonstrate why attacking human positions is a bad life choice. Permission granted. Show them what happens when they threaten the core. ZRTH felt the Marines around her tense with anticipation. These humans had been holding back, she realized. Everything up to this point had been defensive action, protecting themselves and their ally while larger forces moved into position. Now they were going on the attack. Time to earn our pay, Corporal Williams announced, checking her weapons one final time. What's the plan? ZRTH asked. Marcus's helmet turned toward her, and she could almost see his grin behind the faceplate. Same plan as always. Apply maximum violence to the problem until it stops being a problem. He gestured toward the battlefield, where human armor was already advancing through the ruins. Welcome to human warfare, Zaratich. We don't fight for honor or glory or any of that noble stuff. We fight to win, and we don't stop until the enemy remembers why they shouldn't have started the fight in the first place. As if summoned by his words, the ground began to shake with the approach of something massive. Through the smoke and dust, Zaratich could see shapes moving. Not vehicles this time, but creatures. The Vorthak had deployed their war beasts. Each one was the size of small building, with armor-plated hide and weapons grafted directly onto their biology. She had heard stories of these creatures, living tanks bred specifically for war. Nothing in the galaxy could stand against them in direct combat. Well, Marcus said conversationally, this should be interesting. The war beasts emerged from the dust clouds like walking nightmares. Each creature stood 20 meters tall at the shoulder, their hide a patchwork of natural armor and cybernetic enhancements. Weapons platforms had been surgically grafted to their backs, turning them into living siege engines. Their eyes glowed with the red light of combat stimulants, and their roars shook the very ground. Zaratich had seen recordings of these creatures in action. The Vorthak used them to break fortress worlds, sending them against positions that conventional forces couldn't crack. A single war beast could level city blocks, and the Hive had just deployed 3 of them against a handful of humans in the ruins. That's a problem, Corporal Williams observed with remarkable understatement. Multiple problems, Marcus corrected, studying his tactical display. Each beast carries about 40 warriors on its back, plus those weapon platforms look like they could crack a battleship. The lead war beast turned toward their position, its massive head swiveling like a tracking turret. The weapons on its back began to glow as they powered up for a barrage that would eliminate everything in a 2-kilometer radius. All units, this is Go 7. Marcus spoke into his comm system with the same calm tone he might use to order coffee. We have 3 Class 5 Biotitans advancing on our position. Request immediate heavy support. Copy, Ghost 7, came the reply from the orbiting fleet. Be advised, orbital bombardment will not be effective against hardened bioarmor. You'll need to get creative. Understood, Prometheus. Creative is what we do best. Zaratich stared at the approaching monsters, trying to understand how the humans could remain so composed. Your orbital weapons can't penetrate their armor? Not easily, Marcus admitted. The Vorthak breed these things specifically to resist energy weapons. Natural armor that can disperse plasma beams, redundant organ systems, regenerative capabilities. They're basically living bunkers. Then, how do we stop them? Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical readout on his armor's display. When he looked up, Zaratich could hear the smile in his voice. By remembering that humans have been hunting things bigger than ourselves for about 2 million years. Before she could ask what he meant, the human tanks began moving. But instead of advancing to meet the war beasts head-on, they spread out in a wide arc. Their cannons fired, but not at the creatures themselves. Instead, they were targeting the ground around the beasts, creating clouds of superheated dust and debris. Concealment, Marcus explained, watching the tactical display. Can't hit what you can't see clearly. The war beasts roared in frustration as their targeting systems struggled with the artificial dust storm. Their weapons fired blindly into the concealment, massive energy beams carving through the air, but striking nothing vital. Phase 2, Marcus announced, and suddenly the Marine units began moving in ways that defied Zaratich's understanding of tactics. Instead of staying together for mutual support, they split into tiny groups. Individual Marines or pairs spread out across the battlefield, each one moving independently through the chaos. To her trained military mind, it looked like the complete breakdown of unit cohesion. What are they doing? She demanded. They're destroying their own formation. They're doing exactly what they trained for, Marcus replied, checking his weapons one final time. Kalari fight as individuals who support each other. Vorthack fight as units following central command. Humans fight as a pack. I don't understand the difference. Pack hunting, Marcus explained, beginning to move toward the war beasts. When humans evolved, we didn't have claws or natural armor or venom. We had teamwork and intelligence. We learned to bring down creatures hundreds of times our size by working together. Zaratich followed him through the ruins, still struggling to understand what she was seeing. The scattered Marines weren't attacking the war beasts directly. Instead, they were moving to specific positions around each creature, like they were following some predetermined pattern. Each beast has weak points, Marcus continued as they advanced. Joint articulations where the armor is thinner. Sensor clusters that can be damaged. Weapon mounts that can be disabled. The trick is coordinating attacks, so the creature can't respond to all threats simultaneously. The first coordinated strike happened with precision that would have impressed the most skilled Kalari blade dancers. 6 different Marines fired at the lead war beast simultaneously, each targeting a different vulnerability. Missiles struck the creature's rear leg joints while plasma beams carved into its optical sensors. Explosives detonated against weapon mounts, and electromagnetic pulses scrambled its cybernetic systems. The beast stumbled, temporarily blinded and disoriented. Its massive head swung back and forth, trying to locate its attackers. But by the time it could focus on any single threat, the Marines had already moved to new positions. Now you see it, Marcus said with satisfaction. Humans don't fight stronger enemies by becoming stronger ourselves. We fight them by making them fight our kind of war instead of theirs. The second phase of the attack was even more impressive. The human tanks, no longer needed for concealment, had repositioned themselves for mobility kills. Their weapons targeted the war beast's legs and feet, not trying to penetrate the heavy armor, but instead attacking the joints and articulation points. One beast went down hard, its right front leg collapsing as multiple tank rounds shattered the knee joint. The creature crashed into a pile of ruins, its weapons platforms thrown off target by the impact. Before it could recover, Marines with heavy weapons were already moving into close range. This is insane, Zaratich breathed, watching humans in powered armor literally climbing onto the fallen beast's back. They're boarding it like it's a ship. Exactly like a ship, Marcus agreed. Disable the engines, take out the weapons, neutralize the crew. Same basic principle, different target. The Marines on the creature's back moved with lethal efficiency. Plasma charges destroyed weapon mounts, while electromagnetic grenades disabled cybernetic control systems. The Vorthack warriors stationed on the creature's back found themselves fighting boarding actions against enemies who could appear and disappear while using their optical camouflage. But the other 2 war beasts were still advancing, and they had learned from their packmates' fate. These creatures began firing not at specific targets, but at entire areas, turning sections of the ruins into molten glass to deny the humans' concealment. Adapting to our tactics, Marcus observed. That's the problem with fighting intelligent enemies. They learn. So what do? We adapt faster. Marcus activated his comm system again. All units, this is Ghost 7. Implementing Hunter-Killer Protocol Gamma. Repeat, Protocol Gamma is now active. Zaratich watched as the entire human force suddenly changed its behavior again. The scattered Marines began moving in a completely different pattern, one that looked even more chaotic than before. But after a few moments, she began to see the underlying structure. They're hurting the beasts, she realized with amazement. Like driving prey animals. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. The creatures are trying to deny us concealment by destroying the terrain. So we make them destroy the terrain we want them to destroy. The war beasts were systematically demolishing the ruins with their desperate fire, but their destruction was following paths predetermined by human movement patterns. Without realizing it, they were carving clear corridors through the debris field. Corridors that led directly into prepared killing zones. The third war beast walked straight into a concentrated crossfire from human heavy weapons. Not scattered shots that it could shrug off, but focus fire from a dozen different systems, all targeting the same weak point simultaneously. Its armor, impressive as it was, couldn't withstand that kind of concentrated assault. The creature toppled backward, its spine severed by a plasma beam designed to cut through starship armor. It hit the ground with an impact that registered on seismic sensors, and its death roar echoed across the battlefield. 2 down, Marcus reported. 1 to go. The final war beast had stopped advancing. Its handlers, watching their pack mates die, were apparently reconsidering their tactical approach. The creature stood motionless in the middle of the ruins, its weapons trained outward in all directions. "It's learned not to chase us," Zara TH observed. "Now what? Now we do something they really won't expect," Marcus replied with dark satisfaction. "We let them think they're winning." The human forces pulled back, creating the impression of a tactical retreat. The Marines faded into the ruins like ghosts, leaving only their disabled equipment and scattered debris as evidence of their presence. From the war beast's perspective, the humans had been driven off. The creature and its handlers began advancing again, moving toward the human landing zone where the transport ships were still unloading supplies. But Zara TH could see what the Vorthack couldn't. The Marines hadn't retreated. They had repositioned themselves along the creature's path of advance, turning the entire route into one massive ambush zone. "Patience," Marcus murmured, watching his tactical display as the war beast approached the first trigger point. "Humans are persistence hunters. We can wait as long as it takes." The creature was moving through what looked like empty ruins, its sensors detecting no immediate threats. The Vorthack on its back were relaxing their guard, confident that they had broken the human resistance. They were completely unprepared for what happened next. The attack didn't come from one direction or even several directions. It came from everywhere at once. Every piece of debris, every fallen wall, every apparently innocent pile of rubble suddenly revealed hidden Marines with heavy weapons. But this wasn't the scattered harassment they had used before. This was concentrated, overwhelming firepower delivered from perfect ambush positions. Dozens of Marines fired simultaneously, their weapons coordinated by AI targeting systems that ensured no shot was wasted. The war beast's armor held for perhaps 3 seconds before catastrophic failure. Plasma beams carved through joints while kinetic projectiles shattered bone. Electromagnetic pulses scrambled every cybernetic system simultaneously. The creature didn't just die. It was systematically dismantled by weapons fire. When the barrage ended, nothing remained but a smoking crater where the war beast had been standing. "Target neutralized," Marcus reported with professional calm. "All bio-titans eliminated." Proceeding to secondary objectives. Zara TH stared at the destruction, trying to process what she had witnessed. The Vorthack war beasts were considered unstoppable by every military force in the galaxy. The creatures had broken sieges that lasted for years, destroyed armies that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1, and 18 humans had eliminated 3 of them in less than an hour. "How is this possible?" she asked finally. "These creatures have conquered star systems. They destroyed fleets. How did you make it look so easy?" Marcus was already moving toward the next objective, his weapons reloaded and his tactical display showing new enemy contacts. Because every other species tries to fight them on their terms. Strong against strong, armor against armor. Humans learned a long time ago that the best way to fight a bigger opponent is to make them fight your kind of fight instead. But your weapons, your tactics, where did you learn to coordinate like that? "Practice," Marcus said simply. "Humans have been fighting as groups for our entire evolutionary history. We've had millions of years to perfect pack tactics. Most other species develop individual combat skills or massive formations. Humans specialize in small unit coordination. They reached a vantage point where Zara TH could see the broader battlefield. The elimination of the war beasts had broken the Vorthack advance completely. Without their living siege engines, the remaining enemy forces were scattered and demoralized. Human armor was advancing across the field in coordinated waves, not to destroy the fleeing enemies, but to capture strategic positions. Engineers were already setting up defensive positions and supply depots. Medical teams were treating wounded from both sides. "You're not pursuing them," Zarth observed. "No point," Marcus replied. The mission was to neutralize the threat to civilian populations and secure the area. "We've accomplished both objectives. Hunting down fleeing enemies would just waste ammunition and risk casualties. Among my people, allowing enemies to escape is considered a sign of weakness. Among my people, unnecessary killing is considered a sign of poor planning," Marcus countered. "Those Vorthak will go back to their commanders and report what happened here. Word will spread that attacking human-protected targets is a bad idea. That's worth more than a few extra bodies." Before Zarth could respond, her communicator activated. This time, the voice that emerged wasn't Vorthak. It was Kalari, speaking in her own language with the formal tones of military command. "Zarth of the Crimson Blade clan, this is Battlemaster Kethvar aboard the cruiser Starfire's Edge. We detected the battle and came to assist. What is your status?" Zarth looked at the human standing beside her, then at the battlefield where his people had just accomplished the impossible. "Battlemaster, the threat has been neutralized. The human forces have secured the area. Umans." The voice carried clear disbelief. Zarth were reading massive energy signatures and destroyed war beasts. "Are you certain about human involvement?" "I am certain," Zarth replied firmly. "I fought alongside them. They saved my life and protected our civilians." There was a long pause before the Battlemaster responded. This will require a full report. The Council of Blades will want to know everything about these human capabilities." "I understand, Battlemaster. But first, there's something else you should know." "What is it?" Zarth looked at Marcus, who had removed his helmet for the first time since the battle began. His face was younger than she had expected, marked with the kind of scars that came from extensive combat experience. But his eyes held something she recognized, the look of a warrior who fought not for glory, but for the people depending on him. "The humans have offered to help repair my spear," she said finally. I think there are things we can learn from each other." Marcus smiled, extending his hand in what she was learning was a human gesture of friendship and respect. "Welcome to the pack, Zarth. I have a feeling this is the beginning of something interesting." As she clasped his hand with her own, Zarth realized that her spear breaking might not have been a curse after all. It might have been the first step towards something entirely new. 3 days after the battle, Zarth stood in the engineering bay of the human cruiser Prometheus, watching something that should have been impossible. Her ancestral spear, broken and lifeless for what felt like an eternity, was being carefully examined by human technicians who treated it with the same reverence her own people would show. "The crystalline matrix is fascinating," Dr. Sarachan was saying, holding up a fragment of the spear's core to the light. She was Marcus's sister, and the resemblance was unmistakable despite the differences in their chosen professions. Where he was a warrior, she was a scholar. Where he solved problems with violence, she solved them with understanding. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Chun continued, her eyes bright with intellectual curiosity. "The energy storage capacity should be impossible given the material composition, but somehow the quantum lattice structure creates a resonance effect that amplifies power output by several orders of magnitude." Zarth watched the human scientist work, still struggling to understand their approach to everything. Among the Kalari, weapons were sacred objects. Only certain blessed craftsmen could work with them, and only after years of ritual preparation. Yet these humans had immediately begun studying her spear's fragments with machines and instruments, treating it like any other piece of technology. "Is this disrespectful to your people?" Dr. Chen asked, noticing Zarth's expression. "I know different cultures have different approaches to religious artifacts." "I'm not sure anymore," Zarth admitted honestly. 3 days ago, I would have said yes. But 3 days ago, I also thought humans were primitive warriors who couldn't understand honor. Marcus emerged from a nearby workstation where he had been cleaning and maintaining his armor. The advanced suit was open like a mechanical flower, revealing the incredibly complex systems hidden beneath its deceptively simple exterior. "Any luck with the power matrix?" he asked his sister. "Better than luck," Dr. Chun replied with excitement. "I think I understand how it works. The crystalline structure doesn't just store energy. It actually taps into quantum zero-point fluctuations and amplifies them through harmonic resonance. It's not a battery. It's more like a key that unlocks energy from the universe itself. Can you fix it?" "Fix it?" Dr. Chun laughed. "Marcus, I think I can make it better. Human power cell technology combined with Kalari harmonic resonance? We could create something that makes both our technologies look primitive." Zarath felt her breath catch. "You would do that? Combine human and Kalari technology?" "If you're willing," Dr. Chun said seriously. "This isn't about taking your technology or stealing your secrets. This is about collaboration, making something new that neither of our species could create alone." The concept was revolutionary. Throughout galactic history, species had shared technologies through trade or conquest, but true collaboration was almost unknown. Each race guarded their secrets jealously, afraid that sharing knowledge would somehow diminish their own advantages. "Why would you share your technology with us?" Zarath asked. "Surely your military commanders wouldn't approve of giving advanced weapons to potential enemies." Marcus and his sister exchanged a look that spoke of long conversations and shared understanding. "Because that's how humans survived," Marcus explained. "We're not the strongest species or the smartest or the fastest, but we're really good at making friends and learning from them. Our entire civilization is built on the idea that we're stronger together than apart. But we've only just met. How do you know we can be trusted?" "You fought beside me," Marcus said simply. "When your weapon failed and you could have run, you stayed and fought to protect your people. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Dr. Chun activated a holographic display showing the spear's internal structure in 3 dimensions. "Look at this, Zarath. Your ancestors built something beautiful. The energy patterns flow like music made solid. Human technology is more aggressive. We build things to work efficiently under any conditions. But imagine what we could create if we combined Kalari elegance with human adaptability." The hologram shifted, showing theoretical modifications. The spear's crystalline core remained, but it was surrounded by human power regulation systems and adaptive targeting networks. Instead of the fixed energy output of traditional Kalari weapons, this hybrid design could adjust its power levels instantly based on combat requirements. "It would still be your spear," Dr. Chun assured her. "The core, the balance, the fundamental nature of the weapon would remain unchanged. We're just adding new capabilities." Zarath studied the design, her enhanced vision picking out details that would have been invisible to most species. What she saw was remarkable. The human additions didn't replace Kalari technology. They enhanced it, creating new possibilities while preserving everything that made the weapon special. "There's something else," Marcus added, activating another display. "We've been analyzing the combat recordings from the battle. Your fighting style, the way you move and adapt to different situations. We think we can create armor systems that would complement your abilities instead of restricting them." The new display showed schematics for armor unlike anything in Kalari military tradition. Where their people favored ceremonial plate that enhanced their natural grace, this human design was purely functional. But the function was specifically tailored to Kalari physiology and combat techniques. "Four-armed configuration," Dr. Chun explained, pointing to various components. "Independent power systems for each limb, allowing you to operate multiple weapons simultaneously. Optical enhancement to take advantage of your superior vision. Adaptive camouflage systems based on what we learned about your natural hunting instincts." "You studied my species?" Zarath asked, not sure whether to be impressed or concerned. "We study everyone we meet," Marcus replied without apology. "It's not about exploitation. It's about understanding. The better we understand our allies, the better we can fight alongside them. Before Zara-TH could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Red lights flashed as the cruiser's defensive systems activated. Through the engineering bay's viewports, she could see the distinctive energy signatures of ships dropping out of hyperspace. Multiple contacts, the ship's AI announced in a calm, professional voice. Configuration suggests Vorthack Heavy Battle Group. Estimated strength, 12 capital ships plus escorts. Marcus was already moving toward his armor, but Dr. Chin caught his arm. "Wait," she said urgently. "The spear modifications aren't complete. If we're going to combat, Zara-TH will need some kind of weapon." "How long do you need?" Marcus asked, checking his tactical display. 6 hours minimum for a proper repair. Maybe longer. "We don't have 6 hours, Zara-TH pointed out, watching the enemy fleet take positions around the system. "The Vorthack don't negotiate. They'll attack as soon as their formations are complete." Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying both displays and considering their options. When he looked up, his expression was determined but grim. "Then we do this the hard way," he said finally. "Sarah, keep working on the spear. Zara-TH, you're with me." "I don't have a weapon," she protested. "Yes, you do." Marcus activated a storage compartment and pulled out what looked like a simplified version of his own armor. Emergency combat suit, adjusted for Kalari physiology. It's not as advanced as the prototype we've been designing, but it'll keep you alive and give you access to human weapon systems. Dr. Chun was already pulling components from various workstations. "I can't finish the spear in time, but I can give you something." She held up what looked like a traditional Kalari energy blade, but its construction was clearly human. "Plasma sword based on your people's design principles, but using our power cell technology. It won't have the ceremonial significance of your ancestral weapon, but it'll cut through anything you point it at." Zara-TH took the weapon, surprised by how natural it felt in her hands. The weight and balance were perfect for her physiology, and the energy field activated with the familiar hum she remembered from her original spear. "How did you know the proper dimensions?" she asked. "We scanned your original weapon before beginning repairs," Dr. Chen explained. "The important thing was replicating the harmonic frequencies that match your fighting style. This blade will respond to your movements the same way your spear did." The alarm sounded again, more urgently this time. "All hands to battle stations." Admiral Rodriguez's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "This is not a drill. Vorthack Battle Group is moving to attack formation. All squadrons prepare for immediate launch." Marcus sealed his armor and performed the rapid systems check that had become second nature. "Ready for another impossible fight?" he asked Zara-TH. She activated the human combat suit, feeling the systems come online around her. The armor was lighter than anything in Kalari tradition, but she could sense the sophisticated technology woven throughout its structure. Sensors that enhanced her already impressive vision. Power systems that would let her move faster than any unarmored warrior. Communication networks that connected her directly to every human unit in the fleet. "With you," she replied, raising the plasma blade in a traditional Kalari salute. "I'm learning that humans make impossible seem routine." They moved through the ship's corridors toward the hangar bay, where Marines were already boarding assault transports. The Prometheus was a warship, but it was also designed to project power across entire star systems. Its complement of small craft could establish beachheads on hostile worlds or board enemy vessels. "What's the tactical situation?" Marcus asked as they entered the hangar. 12 Vorthack heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and about 40 escort vessels. Lieutenant Morrison reported, her armor already sealed and weapons checked. "They're not just here for revenge. Intelligence suggests this is a full invasion force." "Invasion of what?" Zara-TH asked. "This system doesn't have any major population centers." "They're not after the system," Marcus realized, studying the tactical display. "They're after us. Specifically, they're after the humans who destroyed their war beasts." Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system again. "All personnel, be advised that we have received priority communications from multiple galactic powers. The Vorthak have issued what amounts to a declaration of war against humanity, claiming we represent an unacceptable threat to established military doctrine. ZRTH felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. "They're afraid of you," she said with sudden understanding. "The battle 3 days ago wasn't just a tactical defeat. It was a demonstration that their military superiority isn't absolute." "Exactly," Marcus agreed grimly. "And now they're going to try to eliminate the threat before other species start learning human tactics." "Can the Prometheus handle 12 heavy cruisers?" ZRTH asked. Lieutenant Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Not in a straight fight. But then, when do humans ever fight straight?" The assault transport's engines began spinning up as the hangar bay's atmospheric shields activated. Through the opening, ZRTH could see the Vorthak battle group moving into attack formation. Their ships were massive, black wedges bristling with weapons that could crack planets. "So what's the plan?" she asked. Marcus checked his weapons one final time and settled into the transport's jump seat. "Same as always. We do something they don't expect, we do it better than they thought possible, and we make sure they regret starting the fight in the first place." As the transport launched from the Prometheus's hangar, ZRTH realized that she was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just a battle between two fleets, but a clash between entirely different philosophies of warfare. The Vorthak represented the old way of thinking: superior numbers, overwhelming firepower, and the assumption that might made right. They had conquered dozens of worlds through simple brute force. The humans represented something new: adaptability, cooperation, and the radical idea that intelligence could triumph over raw strength. Looking at Marcus and the other Marines around her, ZRTH found herself believing that the galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived every challenge their hostile universe had thrown at them. The real war was just beginning. The assault transport shuddered as Vorthak plasma cannons opened fire, their massive energy beams carving through space where the small craft had been moments before. ZRTH gripped her restraints as the pilot threw the vessel into evasive maneuvers that would have torn apart any Kalari ship. First lesson of human space combat. Marcus called out over the roar of engines and defensive fire. Speed and unpredictability beat armor and firepower every time. Through the transport's viewports, she could see the larger battle unfolding. The Prometheus and its escort vessels were vastly outnumbered, 12 human ships against more than 60 Vorthak vessels. But instead of forming traditional battle lines, the human fleet was scattered across the system in what looked like complete chaos. "Your admiral is retreating?" ZRTH asked, watching the human ships accelerate away from the enemy formation. "Negative," Lieutenant Morrison replied, studying her tactical display. "Admiral Rodriguez is implementing the Hornet's Nest protocol. We're not retreating. We're setting up." Before ZRTH could ask what that meant, space around the Vorthak fleet suddenly filled with explosions. Not from human weapons, but from mines that had been deployed throughout the system during the 3 days since the ground battle. "Preparation," Marcus explained as their transport curved around a disabled Vorthak destroyer. While their commanders were organizing this revenge fleet, human engineers were turning this entire system into a trap. The mines weren't powerful enough to destroy the massive Vorthak ships outright, but they didn't need to be. Each explosion sent electromagnetic pulses cascading through enemy hulls, disrupting their targeting systems and communication networks. Within minutes, the coordinated Vorthak formation had become a scattered collection of individual ships struggling to re-establish contact with their commanders. Phase 2. The transport pilot announced with grim satisfaction. Human fighters began emerging from hidden positions throughout the system. Not from the main fleet, but from concealed bases on asteroids and dead moons. Hundreds of small, fast attack craft swarmed toward the confused Vorthak ships like angry insects. "We've been in this system for 3 days, ZRTH realized. You've had time to prepare everything. Humans don't believe in fair fights, Marcus confirmed. We believe in winning. And winning means using every advantage you can create. Their transport was heading toward one of the larger Vorthack cruisers, its black hull scarred with blast damage from the mine explosions. The ship was trying to restore order to its defensive systems, but human fighters were already attacking its point defense batteries. "What's our objective?" Zartich asked, checking her weapons. "Boarding action," Lieutenant Morrison replied. "The Vorthack depend on centralized command structures. Take out their command ships, and the rest of the fleet becomes much less effective. You're going to board a ship that's 10 times the size of your transport?" "We're going to board 5 ships simultaneously," Morrison corrected. "This is just one of the assault teams." The concept was insane by any conventional military standard. Boarding actions were desperate measures, used only when all other options had been exhausted. The idea of voluntarily assaulting enemy ships as a primary tactical choice was something no other species would consider. But as their transport approached the Vorthack cruiser, Zartich began to understand the logic. The enemy ship was massive and heavily armed, but those same characteristics made it vulnerable to this kind of attack. Its weapons were designed to engage other capital ships, not small targets moving at close range. Its armor could withstand orbital bombardment, but couldn't protect against enemies who were already inside the hull. 30 seconds to insertion, the pilot announced. Zartich felt her heart begin to race as the transport's assault pod prepared to launch. She had fought in hundreds of battles, but never anything like this. Kalari warriors engaged in single combat or small unit actions. The idea of assaulting a fortress in space while it was actively engaged in combat was beyond her experience. "Remember," Marcus said, checking his weapons one final time, "Vorthack ships are designed around their psychology. Central command and control, hierarchical authority structures. Take out the command crew, and the ship becomes much less dangerous. How do we find a command center in a ship this size?" "Follow the power flows," Lieutenant Morrison explained, activating a display that showed the enemy vessel's internal structure. Vorthack command centers require massive computational power for their coordination systems. They'll be drawing energy from the main reactors in detectable patterns. The assault pod launched from the transport with enough force to compress Zartich into her seat despite the inertial dampeners. Through the small viewport, she watched the Vorthack cruiser grow larger until it filled her entire field of vision. Impact came with a grinding crash as human cutting tools carved through the enemy ship's hull. Emergency force fields activated to maintain atmosphere, and then the Marines were moving. What followed was unlike any combat Zartich had ever experienced. The corridors of the Vorthack ship were designed for creatures 3 meters tall, giving the smaller humans significant mobility advantages. They moved through the vessel like ghosts, using their optical camouflage and superior coordination to avoid enemy strongpoints. But this wasn't the careful, methodical advance she had expected. The Marines moved fast, almost recklessly, striking at specific targets before disappearing again. They weren't trying to secure territory or establish control. They were conducting surgical strikes against critical systems. Engineering section neutralized, she heard one Marine report over the communication network. Weapons control offline, came another voice. Command deck located. Moving to engage. Zartich found herself working alongside Marcus and 2 other Marines, her new armor systems integrating seamlessly with their tactics. The human equipment enhanced her natural Kalari abilities instead of replacing them, turning her into something more effective than either species could achieve alone. They reached the ship's command center after fighting through 3 levels of increasingly desperate defense. The Vorthack crew had barricaded themselves behind blast doors and heavy weapons, but human technology made their defenses irrelevant. "Plasma charges," Marcus announced, placing shaped explosives against the blast door. The explosion that followed didn't just blow the door open. It sent superheated gas cascading through the command center, disabling electronic systems and forcing the defenders to take cover. By the time the Vorthack could respond, the Marines were already among them. The battle was brief and decisive. Vorthack warriors were individually powerful, but they were trained to fight in formation with support from their command structure. Cut off from orders and facing enemies who could appear anywhere without warning, they were quickly overwhelmed. Command center secured, Morrison reported, beginning data extraction. While the other Marines worked to download intelligence from the ship's computers, Marcus approached the massive command chair where the Vorthack fleet commander had been directing the battle. The creature was still alive, though barely, its carapace cracked and ichor leaking from multiple wounds. "Why?" the Vorthack commander asked in accented but understandable galactic standard. "Your species is primitive. You have no right to such power." Marcus removed his helmet, revealing his scarred but still young face. "Power isn't about technology or individual strength. It's about working together, something your people never learned. You cannot defeat the Hive. We have conquered 17 star systems. Our fleets number in the thousands, and they're all organized exactly like this one," Marcus replied calmly. "Centralized command, rigid hierarchy, predictable tactics. You've conquered other species because they try to fight you on your terms. Humans don't make that mistake." Through the command center's viewports, Zara TH could see the broader battle reaching its conclusion. One by one, the Vorthack ships were going dark as human boarding teams completed their missions. The mighty invasion fleet was being systematically dismantled from within by forces they couldn't effectively engage. "Impossible," the Vorthack commander breathed. "No species has ever developed such tactics." "Because no other species needed to," Zara TH said, speaking for the first time since the boarding action began. "Humans evolved on a world where they were prey animals. They learned to hunt creatures much larger and stronger than themselves. They learned to work together or die alone." She looked at Marcus, understanding finally dawning. "This isn't just about military tactics. This is about survival instincts refined over millions of years. Every human carries the genetic memory of the hunt," Marcus agreed. "We know how to identify weak points, how to coordinate attacks, how to bring down enemies that should be able to destroy us. It's not technology. It's evolution." The Vorthack commander's eyes dulled as life finally left its massive form. But its words echoed in the sudden silence of the command center. "The galaxy will not accept this. Other species will unite against you rather than face the same fate." "Maybe," Marcus said quietly, "or maybe they'll learn that there's a better way than conquest through force." Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled through their communication system.